Education Secretary Bridget Phillipson says the government is to stop further commencement of the Higher Education Freedom of Speech Act. The bill ensures that higher education providers and students' unions must protect freedom of speech and academic freedom, and allows individuals to bring a legal case against their institution if it fails to protect their right to free speech. But Phillipson says Labour may repeal the bill, which was given royal assent in May last year. Baroness Claire Fox has been a huge advocate for the bill, and I'm delighted to say that she joins me now. Welcome to the show, Claire. I want to ask you about this because you've been obviously involved in the House of Lords, debating this bill endlessly, and it wasn't perfect, was it? But now it's just gone.
Yeah, I mean, it was a bill which I felt was necessary but not adequate to fight for free speech on campus, because you do have to have a change of culture. But I think just having a piece of legislation that gave greater power to lecturers, students, people who've been cancelled who are external speakers, just to be able to say, no, the law says that you must give us free speech. That was a great boost for free speech activism. And the thing is, it was a done and dusted bill. I mean, we've gone through it. It was months of argument and debate. It was watered down. There was attempts at stopping it. There was amendments. All this went on and on and on. And eventually, with a great sigh of relief, last May, it got royal assent. And I can safely tell you, it never dawned on me that the Labour Party would cancel it. I mean, I was naive. You know, I just thought that they would accept it. They might not honour it entirely. But it didn't. This is a really duplicitous and cowardly act, because it was done via a memo, a communique, a written communique at the end of last week, when in fact Bridget Phillipson could have done it in the House of Commons at the dispatch box, but she didn't.
You raise a very good point there. You know, this has just been snuck in just before Parliament goes into recess. It hasn't been announced in Parliament. There's no opportunity for people to argue about it. There's something quite ironic, isn't there, that, you know, this is actually about this was about protecting free speech, but they don't want to have a debate about it.
No, and honestly, when you actually read that communique, it's very worrying, because it's not even as though they're saying we might repeal this bill, but the extended written explanation actually uses all of the language that we're familiar with, those of us who've ever been on the receiving end of cancel culture, because it says, oh, well, this particular bill, which would, after all, just enhance free speech rights, she said, would be very burdensome for the sector. That is, management don't like it. That's what she's saying. You know, the Blob and all those NGOs and the HE, higher education activists and lobbyists, who actually are the people who have been doing a lot of the cancel culturing over a period of time, they'll find it burdensome. As though it's not burdensome if you're, I don't know, Professor Joe Phoenix, or one of the many people that you've had on your show over the years, lecturers, who the burdensome bit was that they were silenced for perfectly legitimate views on campus. So that's one problem. The second explanation that was given, which I really found disgraceful, was that she said, you know, there are other priorities. You know, universities are having a tough time with their money. Let's help them out with that. And really, this legislation could mean that minority groups could be subject to hate speech. In other words, she's reinforcing the trend towards censoriousness that your programme has highlighted for years, and which the bill was meant to counter. She's saying, oh, we can't have a free speech bill because otherwise we'll have all these hate speech types wandering around saying offensive things. And as you know, that's the way that you silence and chill discussion on campus.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds very much almost as though, I mean, I'm not putting words into her mouth, but that she doesn't care about the fate of academics like Joe Phoenix or Kathleen Stock, who are driven out of their jobs and harassed by colleagues for having the wrong opinion, or feminists like Julie Bindel or Linda Bellos, who is no platformed. You know, surely even the Labour Party should be able to concede that academic freedom has to be the priority for any higher education institution.
I think actually what it reveals, and it's something that very good interview you had with Joan Smith earlier about the Labour Party, is they have got no instinct for free speech. They don't really have a sort of a sense that freedom matters that much. It's a kind of third order party. So, of course, Bridget Phillipson says, I believe in free speech and academic freedom, but, and it's a very big but. And one group that's really going to be affected by this, by the way, are students, because it's often done of, we're only doing this because there's a lot of vulnerable students who might be subject to harassment or hate speech. That's why we're looking at it again. It's not yet been repealed, by the way, but it sounds as though they're going to do that. But the thing is that if you talk to students, they will tell you that too often the atmosphere is one of huge self-censorship. You're frightened to say the wrong thing because you'll be ostracized. It's not a no platforming situation. It's more a climate of conformity and orthodoxy. And that's bad enough in society in general. And we are all upset about that. It's why Free Speech Nation has existed. It rings a bell that we know that we need free speech. But in an academic context, it's disastrous because the point of universities are that you have free and open research, intellectual inquiry, you're seeking the truth. You need to be able to have dissenting views, people asking awkward questions. And for young people, in order to be able to become critical thinkers, they need to hear a wide variety of opinion, not just one, EDI tick box agreed set of approved opinions. That's what's really worrying.
Isn't it strange that, the view that you are advocating there would have been the norm just 15, 20 years ago in higher education? Everyone would have accepted that part of the point is plurality of views, that people go there to discuss ideas. What do you think has gone wrong within the universities to such an extent that we even need legislation to protect what should be a given?
Well, I think that there's a couple of things. I mean, one was when they brought in market forces into universities and turned the student into the customer rather than somebody who was going to learn. A lot of academics kind of lost power, and they spent a huge amount of time trying to keep students happy. And often that means keeping the most activist, loudmouth students happy. That's one thing that's happened. But also, actually, universities have been a place which is theorized around things like social theories, around critical race theory, or, a situation at the moment in which decolonizing everything counts. And so they've wrapped up a lot of the most regressive trends that usually demand only one side gets a hearing. And if anyone fights back, that they're trying to exhibit their white privilege, all of those things that you're familiar with. That got given a kind of intellectual gloss on university campuses. So that's the other thing. And finally, the universities have all signed up to these charters, like the Stonewall Charter, or there's a wide variety of them, Athena Swan, a whole range of them, where you basically say, I prove that I am going to be an active anti-racist as an organisation to attract all these right-on students, and we promise that we'll be trans allies, that we'll be a particular type of anti-racist, and so on and so forth. And this has been incredibly corrupting because they brought on board a wide range of administrators and managers, almost as many of them as there are academics, who have basically turned university campuses into a place that has to fulfill the requirements of these third-party organisations rather than genuine places of intellectual engagement and argument and so on and so forth. I was thinking when I was listening to you having that conversation with Joan Smith, if you tried to have that on a university campus now, some administrator would say that you'd breached every rule of, equity, diversity and inclusion. But imagine if you had that conversation on a university campus and students heard it. They might learn something. They might not agree with what Joan said. They might disagree with the questions you asked, but they could join in the debate and discussion and think about it. And that's what education should be about. And it's what we try and do at the Academy of Ideas with the events we organise. But sadly, academics have been spineless in the face, especially academic management, spineless in the face of some of these trends, have looked the other way, and now look what's happened. And then, by the way, we should just finish off by noting we should never be dependent on the law. I mean, if there's one lesson I've learned from this piece of legislation being torn up so easily, is that we want changes in the law that are progressive, of course. It's great to have enhancements in a new piece of legislation, but never depend on the law or on the law courts. We need to build a culture, grassroots culture from below in order to defend free speech. That's the only way that you can really guarantee it.
Thanks, Claire Fox. That's all we've got time for.